Humans have a love-hate relationship with change. We need it for growth and variety, and yet we hate the upheaval it brings into our lives. Resilience seems to be the answer. So let's explore a new kind of conversation where we look at the turbulence of change and the resilience that enables us to not only survive it, but to truly thrive from it. I'm Paula Shaw, life transition expert, grief counseling specialist, and author. I'll be spotlighting influential people on this podcast, people who have taken the steps to change it up. So join us as we share valuable information to help you navigate the rocky waters of change. Come on, jump on in. Welcome to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw. And one more time, I'm going to say what I've said so many times before. I'm delighted you're here because I have somebody very special to introduce you to today. As you all know, if you've been following the show, we are calling this season a season of grief, because we've been looking at grief from many different perspectives and many different populations of grievers. And today we are going to continue that exploration. We're going to be looking at the issues of divorce and elder abuse. Now, I know a lot of people think that grief is what happens when somebody dies. And yes, it is. But as we've been exploring in this season, grief is much bigger than that. Grief, remember, is the normal, natural response to any significant loss. So, yes, it's a huge, significant loss when someone dies. But what about divorce? Let's think about that for just a moment. What are the losses that a person might be looking at when they go through divorce? Well, obviously, a loss of material things, material property, perhaps a loss of money. What about the loss of the security that they had in the relationship? The loss of their identification as a married person? The loss of perhaps friend groups? Because I know I experienced that after my first divorce. I don't want to sound like a serial divorcee. There have been two, though. Anyway, but after the first one, I thought we had this really solid group of friends. And all of a sudden, I wasn't invited to anything because I was a single woman. And the other ladies weren't all that comfortable. Even though they were my friends, they weren't that comfortable. So that was a huge loss for me and a huge surprise and upheaval. But what else are we losing when we're looking at divorce? Maybe the home situation, maybe the, what do I want to say? We talked about security, the loss of the dreams that you had when you went into the marriage. This is one of the hugest things I find myself working with clients in my private practice who are going through this kind of a life transition. You began with all these hopes and dreams, and you were so sure of what the future looked like. And maybe what's happened because of many different issues that we'll be talking with our guests today about, that communication is gone, the camaraderie is gone, and what's also gone are the dreams and the hopes that you had in the beginning. That's a huge one. It's really a huge one. It's not a tangible kind of thing, but it's huge because we humans are emotional beings. Without our emotions, we would be really robots pretty much, or as my daughter says, just walking meat suits. But we have our emotions, and the emotions and the thoughts that we have work to create the behaviors. And that is all of what goes in to making us humans and making us the unique beings that we are on this planet. Let's look at the loss of elder abuse. And I'm really anxious to talk to Rachel King, our guest, about this because, when I was young, I don't know about the rest of you, I don't remember ever hearing about elder abuse. Perhaps the term didn't even exist. I'm looking forward to finding out more about that. I mean, the idea that anyone would ever hurt small children or old people, or I should say older, because I'm moving into that range myself. But the idea that anyone would hurt these helpless beings in our society is so reprehensible to most of us. And yet it's happening out there. And I'm looking forward to talking with Rachel today about what does it look like? What are they experiencing? What are they feeling, the victims? And what is our government doing to help these people? So I hope you will stay with us because we're going to explore all of these questions and so much more with our lovely guest today, attorney Rachel King. So let me tell you just a little bit about Rachel before we get started. So, since the age of 12, she was a serial entrepreneur. I have a feeling this woman knows how to get things done. And she was in the military for 7 years. And as if that wasn't all enough, and she had multiple businesses, she went into law. Her father was a lawyer, and she was inspired from a young age. She opened her own practice here in 2014, or was it 2004? I'll ask her. And she deals with many different kinds of law. I'm going to put on my eyes here so I make sure I get those correct. It was 2014, by the way. Her firm specializes in family law, estate law, real estate law, business law, and it's growing. So who knows what's coming next? So let's find out from Rachel herself. Rachel, please join us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor to be with you today.
Oh, I am so glad you're here because this is a topic I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily associate with grief. And yet, you and I know that people in the kinds of circumstances we've been talking about, divorce and elder abuse, they're dealing with a huge level of grief, aren't they?
They are dealing with so much grief, and it permeates to all different people within their circumstance, whether it's divorce. It's not just the individual, it goes to children
Oh,
and
yes.
families. When we're talking about elder abuse, it also affects more typically than just the senior who's maybe the victim.
Hmm.
And I think that especially in divorce, it's really, really hard to understand that grief is natural, and actually it is almost a requirement to go through the grief
Mm.
process in order to successfully get through your marriage and the divorce process to be happy and
Mm.
successful on the other side.
You have brought up so many great points that I want to explore with you. But how about first, if you tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about your background? What was it like growing up for you? What inspired you to take this entrepreneurial path? And what were there experiences in all of that that helped you to develop the compassion that you clearly have now for the people you work with?
I grew up in a divorced family, actually.
Ah,
So
there
I
we go.
think that has framed quite a bit of how I interact and maybe my understanding of what people are going through.
Hmm.
But both of my families, I had the very quintessential visitation schedule where I spent
Ah,
summers with
yes.
my dad and the school year with my mom.
Hmm.
Both of my parents got remarried when I was, I don't know, under 3, and I've had the same step parents for my entire life. So I have this very
Mm.
unique situation where, while I come from divorced parents, I also come from very strong family units within each family.
Yes.
But long story short, both of my families have very strong entrepreneurial roots. They're all self-employed, and
Mm.
so I was raised in a lifestyle that offered that flexibility, but also
Yes.
understood everything that came with the benefits and really the hardships that come with owning a business. It's very natural for me, and I
Mhm.
really love that I can be my own boss. I can make my own decisions. I can have the fruits of all of my labor, and I prefer that far more than having to also, carry the burdens.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you did some 7 years in the military. Tell us a little bit about that, and were there losses that came up for you during that period of time?
I did 7 years, mostly because when I was 18, I learned probably in the first 2 months of college that I wasn't quite ready to go to college. So my only options were, well, I didn't really have any options. I couldn't afford to live. So that was one thing I I dealt with. So through the military, I knew that I wasn't going to be a career
Mhm.
military service member. But I thought, well, this will give me some income. It'll give me something to do, and I'll figure out kind of my next step.
Yes.
The way that so I've been very fortunate. I was never deployed, but I did through the 7 years see and deal with loss in a way that many service members and family members do when they have not suffered a direct maybe casualty themselves. So
Mhm.
my first loss, and I don't know that, again, I don't know that we give people credit enough for this. It's a natural part, I think, of becoming an adult, was when I was shipped to basic training. And from that moment
Oh.
on, I didn't have my parents anymore. So you're
Ah,
thrown into the adult life. I didn't get to come home for Christmas. I didn't get
wow.
to do things, call when I wanted to. And while it was a choice, I still think there's an element of grief or loss that you end up having to deal with. We often say it's just growing up, right? It's part of adulting, and it is, and
Uh-huh.
we all deal with it. But that was my first, I think, lesson in, oh my gosh, I'm like a real grown up, and this is the military. They're telling me what
Yeah.
to do. I have friends that have been deployed, and I've lost friends that have been deployed.
Mm.
I've have friends that have survived but have serious PTSD or other mental health issues where I feel like I've lost them because they're
Yeah,
really not the same person
absolutely.
that I knew. And then my husband was deployed for 18 months. So that was a whole other
Oh
thing
my.
that we had to deal with. So there was a lot that the military had me learn and that I had to overcome. I think it was great. I'm so happy that I went. I don't think any of it was negative. I don't think any of it was for nil, but it was certainly a process. And I think a lot of it has, again, helped me figure out how to be the kind of adult that I want, the kind of wife and mom that I
Mm.
want, and certainly the kind of business owner and lawyer that I am today.
Yes. Oh, and that's a perfect spot for us to take a quick break. But I have so many more questions I want to ask you. So we will be right back with Rachel King. Stay with us.
Is living in today's fast-paced world making you feel stressed and out of balance? Are anxiety, sleeplessness, depression, lack of focus, or weight gain robbing you of your relationship and your energy? If you're ready for change, you need to call Paula Shaw. Paula helps you identify and eliminate self-sabotaging thinking and behavior. Using a wide variety of mind-body techniques, she provides her clients with the most effective processes for their specific needs. To book a session with Paula, call 858-480-9234. That's 858-480-9234.
Welcome back to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and with me today is attorney Rachel King. And we are talking about the grief that's experienced by people who are going through divorce, and also something that is newer in my life experience. And I'm really wanting to learn more about it from Rachel, and that is elder abuse. In our last segment, we were just talking about Rachel's 7 years in the military. And, a question kind of came to my mind when you mentioned going to boot camp, Rachel. Um, I mean, I only know boot camp from what I've seen in the movies and heard from other people, but it seems like it's part of the deal. Excuse me, to sort of strip you of your identification the way it has been. Is that true, or is that just in the movies?
No, that's definitely true. I think, let's keep in mind, I went through boot camp. It's embarrassing to say, but like over 20 years ago, right? So a lot has changed over these 20 years. When I went to boot camp, women were still, I don't want to say new, but fairly new into the military. So we still had, we had all different circumstances, and they weren't completely comfortable with how women were going to be going through boot camps. There's only one place that you could go through boot camp as a woman.
Wow.
So you do get stripped of your identity to the extent that, we've all heard the breaking down to build back up, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is what they do. And I actually think it was probably the best thing that could happen to everybody that's young that goes through basic training, because you have
Really?
no idea what you're doing. But at the same token, it's not for the faint of heart. You have to know that when you're getting yelled at and asked, I don't know that they do, I'd be interested if anybody knows if they still do this, but when you're getting yelled at and forced to do push-ups over and over and over again, and you're really kind of being, belittled to a certain degree, that it's not personal, right? They need to get you, they have an end goal. And again, while my drill sergeants were very hard on us, I never felt as though they didn't want me to succeed. I knew that they wanted me to succeed. I knew that when I was doing push-ups till I was, my arms failed, that it was ultimately because I couldn't pass the PT test that they gave me on the first day. And I had to by the end in order to pass basic training, So again, I'm not sure how they do basic training now, but I believe that's still kind of the philosophy, is we need to get you down so we can teach you the skills and get you to not only the mental toughness, but the physical toughness that we have to have you at.
And, a couple of things that occur to me as a therapist. On the one hand, the breaking down of your identification, or the yelling at you, the treating you in ways that some of us might call abusive, I think it forces you to dig down inside and say, am I worth fighting for? Am I going to let this bring me down, or am I going to just do what has to be done because I'm not going to let this destroy me? So I think it might elicit some of that in a person. Does that feel correct to you?
Yeah, I think it helps you look, or at least for me, it really had me force me to shift my perspective. I'm a big believer that everything is perspective, even the really, really bad things. If you can shift your perspective then it can really save how you handle a situation. And so for me, I remember I got off, so one thing that's truly like the movies, and this is true of everybody that I know that has at least been through when I went through, is they get you fly across the country or wherever you're going, and they deliberately don't have you get to your basic training location until like 11 p.m. And then they get you off the bus and they just yell at you, and you're so tired and you can't see anything. And then it's at that late night time that they kind of take away everything that you've brought, right? Because you're not allowed to have anything. I remember the next day, I thought, after everything had been removed, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like, what in the world? I can't leave this place. And I've just, and then I had this commander who came and talked to us, and he said, all you need to do is get from one meal to the next. Who cares what you're doing later? Just get from one meal to the next. And that really helped me shift my perspective. So every time it was do more push-ups, it's like, well, I can just do one more push-up, right? All I have to do is the one more. And then by the end of it, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, I just did like 300 push-ups, or, oh my gosh, I just ran a mile in like 6 minutes, or I figured out how to get from point A to point B with like a compass, and I didn't even know how to use compasses when I first started, or whatever it is.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of the breaking down to build back up forces you to shift your perspective so that you can find out that you're capable of it, and then learn how to deal with hard situations in a way that isn't going to have you go to the poor me wallowing. You'll die then, right? If you're at war, it's just, okay, now how am I going to overcome this? Like, this is not a good situation. What am I going to do? And I think that's what my big takeaway was from the military.
That's really huge. And, I can't tell you how many times I'll be sitting with a client who says to me, I can't take it. I don't know how I can go on. And what I'll say to them is 1 minute at a time. Don't take on all the tomorrows. We only live one moment at a time. And I think as humans, we tend to project into the future. And that's when all the fear and the anxiety comes up, because it's all unknown out there anyway. And so I love what you're saying, because it's pretty much that, just one step at a time, one breath at a time, one moment at a time. And what we can do as humans when we just take it in that one at a time kind of a pattern is astounding. Like you said, 300 push-ups when you thought you couldn't do 50. So it's a fabulous life lesson, I think. And I really see that as being valuable in so many ways. So thank you for sharing that. It was so insightful.
I really think I do. I use it in my parenting. I use it in my every area of that I practice. But I really bring it with my clients too, because their cases are so overwhelming. It's not as overwhelming for me. I'm the attorney. I stay emotionally distanced from them. I'm sure you have to too, as you know, in your work. You can't go down with them, but to be effective. But if I can help them understand, yes, the lawsuit may take 3 years, but today we're just going to do this one thing because that's all we can do.
Yes.
And then we'll get to the next one. And ultimately, hope we'll reach our goal, or we'll reach the end, whatever that goal might change. But but just one day, life is very overwhelming, but you throw a lawsuit in there and
good point, counselor. It's really true. And I think, I mean, you're the expert, so you tell me, but I would imagine when people arrive in your office and they're facing a lawsuit, or let's talk about divorce, facing the prospect of divorce, there are so many emotions going on. So let's talk a little bit about that. When somebody first comes to you and they're looking at a divorce, whether they chose it or whether they didn't, it's kind of like you said when you got to boot camp. Even though you chose to be there, that doesn't mean you don't have moments of feeling like, oh my God, what am I doing? Or what have I done? So choices that we make, even that we desire, like let's say getting married, still create loss because we're looking at a change in the way our life was. So you're dealing with a huge change in the way people's lives were when they're now contemplating divorce. So what does that look like for you when most people first show up?
I approach every client, and actually I've made it very clear to my office that we need to understand that when somebody comes in for divorce, it is one of the it's rated the top most difficult things they're ever going to face in their entire life.
Yes.
And again, while it's our job, and we're only effective if we stay emotionally distanced, we need to have the ability to understand that this is all consuming for them.
Yeah.
I have 250 cases. I can't possibly remember every fact or every family member of every case without looking it up, right?
Of course.
But my clients, they sure can remember my name, and they can remember everything they've told me, and every client, because we're a very small unit. And so I really try and go into every case that every client with, remembering that this is their entire world and they can't get out of it for a little bit, and to have that empathy with as I'm walking through that. So don't get frustrated because they're frustrated. Of course they're frustrated. Let's just walk it with them. But one of the things that I think is the hardest part about divorce, Paula, that I think I would love for people to understand and know that it's okay, is divorce is a grief, is a loss. So you're losing your spouse. And like you've said, you had huge dreams, and I have yet to meet somebody who said, oh, when I got married, I wanted to file for divorce. We've all heard the people that say, on my marriage, I knew I was going to end up in divorce.
Yeah, I knew this wouldn't last.
But nobody goes in and says like, I got married for the divorce process. So the part that I think is the most difficult in a divorce is actually not the dividing of the assets or even the figuring out of the custody and support, though that's hard. It's you don't like this person. You don't want to be married to them anymore.
Right.
And you don't understand why you're still having to grieve a loss of somebody you don't want.
Right.
It's not like in death where you still want this person, you still loved this person, and now you don't have them. In a divorce, you don't want them. You don't like them anymore. And I think it can be really conflicting for people to say, I don't want to be married to this person,
Yes.
but then not understand that they still have to grieve the loss because this person was such a major part of their life and their life decisions, even if it was for a brief time.
It's that shared history, I think. That's a big part of the loss. It began with the dreams, but then you lived into each day and you did things together and you had conversations, and this history between you grows. And I think that's a big part of the loss, is that history. And then, of course, go ahead.
And even for people, and again, this is maybe what a lot of people don't understand, even for people that are in abusive relationships, you still have to mourn the loss.
Yes.
Why do you have to mourn the loss of your abuser? Well, because they have been in your house, in your life, in some capacity for such a long time, kind of like your identity. Maybe for that, it moves more into grieving the loss of the identity that you had as a victim, but you still have to. And if you don't honor yourself enough to give you the space to grieve, you're kind of stuck in it.
Totally.
And I just really wish that everybody understood that there's nothing wrong with you for wanting or needing to grieve the loss of your ex or your cheating spouse or your abusive spouse, and like nothing's wrong with it. Your crazy spouse, it doesn't matter. You have to. And actually, if you can, you'll probably have a better co-parenting relationship if there's kids. You'll probably have a more successful life after divorce, and you won't be what I call married to the divorce, which is the worst of the worst.
Ooh, that's a great term. Great term. Say a little more about married to the divorce.
So I call the marriage to the divorce the people that want to get out of marriage. So they file, but then they can't make any decisions to actually end their marriage. So every time they fight over everything, and they won't ever finalize it. These are people that end up going through a divorce process for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
I usually get involved in these kind of cases. I don't like to be involved in cases where people are married to the divorce. To me, they're emotionally attached so much to this other person that even through the hate and the emotions, they can't cut it off. So instead of participating in a marriage in a functional and healthy way, they're now participating in this relationship with this person in a very negative, draining, emotional way.
Yes.
And those are the cases where even when we get to a full settlement agreement, they end up deciding that I'm not going to sign because now actually I decided that, I want the silverware. And it's like, but you gave up the silverware like 3 years ago, but it's not fair. And it's like, oh geez. And typically it's not one person that's married to the divorce. Sometimes it is, it's two people. And you're just like, it's devastating to watch, because you almost want to say, if you put this much effort into your marriage, you'd probably be happily married. But now you guys are just ruining each other and spending so much money and in such a negative way. So I think if people can grieve, that's best. And certainly if you find yourself in a situation where you are married to a divorce, there's ways out of it. And it's probably has nothing to do with the legal system or the attorneys or how irrational your spouse is. It has to do with a deeper issue.
I was just thinking exactly that. And, I think on the other side too, it's like we were exploring a couple of weeks ago on the show, sex trafficking, and people always ask, why don't these women leave? Why don't they leave? But people don't understand the complex layers of the relationship. And then there's that little H word, 4-letter word called hope. And that one can lead you down the path for years because you just keep hoping that if you love them enough, or if you do what it takes to make them happy, or if they just have a moment of insight, everything is going to change and be better.
And for the people that are married to the divorce, I don't know that I've
Mhm.
ever seen them where they hope, but I do see it's kind of goes to the dream is that as
Mhm.
long as you're not legally divorced and you haven't signed those papers, you still have a connection to this person.
That's
They're
exactly
still
right.
your spouse.
Yep.
You're still married. You still have a reason to talk to them. You have
Mhm.
reasons to have them completely consume you, whether they're good or bad.
Mhm.
And taking that away can be devastating if you've had all of your dreams and all of the hope that we thought we were going to have when we got married. Once you sign on the dotted line, it's
It's
completely
over.
done. And I think that's where I see people that are married to their divorce, really the hang up is that now they don't want to completely let their spouse go.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can be for a lot of reasons. Sometimes people get addicted to each other or to the drama in that relationship. Because think about children. Children need attention. We all know that. But they don't really, in certain circumstances, they don't care if they're getting attention for something they're doing that's wonderful or for acting out, as long as they're getting attention. And some of us, even though we're in adult bodies, are still really coming from those motivations. And so I think you're absolutely spot on. As long as I'm connected to you, whether it's because I'm angry and I'm refusing to sign those papers, or because I'm being wonderful, I've got that connection. And connection is huge for human beings.
And connection doesn't, as long as you have that connection in a marriage or a divorce, you don't have to admit that your marriage is over.
Yes. Oh my God, that's huge, Rachel. We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to explore a little bit the kids. We haven't talked about the losses and the grief of the children. So we'll be right back. Stay with us. Paula Shaw here. I'm thrilled that LifeWave phototherapy patches, which use no drugs or chemicals, have become a part of my life and my business. My family and I all use their wearable patch technology, and the results are life-changing. My parents in their 90s used the X39 patch, which activates stem cells, reverses aging, and improves the function of every area of the brain. I love X39 because I can work out with the 30-year-olds with no problem. And it's erased my fine lines and given my skin a youthful glow. LifeWave patches use a patented form of phototherapy, frequencies of light, to safely boost health and wellness at the cellular level. No drugs. To learn more, go to my website, lifewave.com/safe health. That's lifewave.com/safe health. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and with me today is attorney Rachel King, and we are exploring the grief that results from divorce and elder abuse. So, Rachel, we've been looking at some of the dynamics between the divorcing couple. Does your work involve the children directly ever, or are you just seeing what's happening in terms of them coming up with an agreement for visitation and all of that?
I don't typically talk to the kids, but every divorce that has children that I deal with has some kind of child custody or visitation order. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually required in California to finalize your divorce paperwork to have that in writing somehow.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest issue that I see is, and this is no surprise, is how the parents' actions affect the children. And I see this, and I think I'm maybe a little bit more sensitive to it just because I was a child of a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that we ever realize until maybe it's too late. So hopefully, maybe this will resonate with somebody in advance. Your kids love both parents,
Mm.
no matter what. even when the parent is the worst parent in the world. They just do. Kids come out
Wow.
loving their parents, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now, as they get older, they may take a different position or they may see things a little bit differently, but it's very natural for kids to love their parent, no matter how much you hate them.
Yes.
So I think where I come in, and I always advocate for my clients because that's my job, but I really also, especially in my family law cases, try and look at creating court orders for my clients that are not only going to do what they want, but that
Mhm.
are also going to be successful for the family unit. I don't
Yeah.
have to live the court orders, right? It's
Mhm.
not my life. So as soon as they're done, they get to go and carry these out. So what's going to be the best that keeps them out of court and gets them, to have a successful family unit, because there's still a family unit. Again,
Right.
something that people don't want to necessarily accept
Yes.
post-divorce. Your kids see everything, they know everything, and they can't help but love
Mhm.
them. And to the extent that my clients can really, it's always a court order, but never talk negatively about the other parent,
Yes.
never, encourage the visitation for the other parent. And it's not because it's the right thing to do. So a lot of people say, oh, but I mean, it is the right thing to do, but that's not even why. Even from a selfish standpoint, we can say, if your kids aren't going to like you, if you're talking negative about somebody they love,
That's
right?
right.
That's human nature.
That's exactly
Um,
right.
and not only as an attorney do I see this play out over and over, but as a human being,
Mhm.
my parents spoke negatively about each other. They were good in every other case, but
Mhm.
I resented so much my parents, when they would speak negatively about the other one. It didn't matter that they were right in what they said. I didn't hear it because I was a
That's
child
right.
and I couldn't comprehend. All I thought is,
Mhm.
how dare you? I love this person so much and you're saying horrible things about them. I don't like you anymore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we need to be really aware of the fact that not only have the children lost the only thing that they knew, which is a family unit, and they have to relearn how this is going to work,
Mhm.
but to eliminate some of the stress that they're also feeling. They should never feel bad as they go through this grief process for loving a parent.
Yes.
Ever. They
Oh,
should never feel guilty for that.
that's a huge point, Rachel. Huge. And I went, as I mentioned, I went through a divorce. And I remember early on, I don't even remember the situation, but I remember I was saying something, and I wasn't, thank you God, one of those people that constantly deluges their children with bad talk about the other parent. But I was saying something that was derogatory, and my daughter, who was only 11 at the time, called me out and said, "He's still our father." And boy, I heard that, thank goodness. And I really made that effort, because the other thing is, you don't want your children to feel guilty or disloyal to you because they're loving the parent that you're upset with.
And you want them to, so I'm married to my children's dad, and I've had the same kind of situation where I've been really upset and I've said something, and
Mhm.
then they haven't called me out on it, but they've kind of gone up to him and been like, "Oh, we love you, Dad." I'm like, "Wait a second, he was the bad guy, not me." And then I've had to come back and reflect and be like, so this isn't, I don't want them to think in their relationship. Let's take divorce out of it. I don't want
Yeah.
them to think in their relationship that it's acceptable to speak negatively of the other, of their
Yeah,
spouse, right? In front of their
right.
kids, right? We're also setting an example.
That's
And
right.
so again, don't like your ex, that's fine. Most people don't like their ex, and there's that, you're allowed to not like them. But
Mhm.
how is your presentation in front of your children going to not only affect their relationship with
Yes.
you, but also affect how they participate in their adult relationships?
Absolutely, absolutely. The blueprint is being established, and you said something earlier. I think I want to emphasize, because sometimes I think people don't realize it. They think, oh, they're just children. They're not paying attention. Not only are they paying attention, they're seeing and hearing everything we do, but energetically. You know, I come from the field of energy psychology, and quantum physics has taught us that everything's energy. So even if I'm not saying words and screaming at my husband or the person I'm separated from, but I'm fuming and I'm just so upset and so angry, they're picking up on that. And even if they don't know exactly what they're feeling, they are picking up on those energies and being affected by them. So I think it's really, if we want to be responsible when we're going through a situation like divorce, it really is in the highest good of everybody to find ways to manage your feelings. Maybe you have to get on the phone in private with your best friend and get it all out with her or him, but not the kids. Not the kids.
It's funny you should bring that up. I had a TikTok actual video where I said, you know, you need to make sure your kids go to visitation with the other parent. You can get them to go to school, so you can get them to go to visitation. And I had a lot of people that were pushing back and saying, no, that's, you know, so you want me to manipulate, you want me to coerce, you want me to do all of these things. And I said, well, we do all of those every day, as parents, right? We force our kids to do stuff. We coerce them to do things. We make them fear, right? That's what parenting is. And I said, but it goes even farther than that. From an energy standpoint, you should get your child excited to go.
Oh, I love
excited
that.
to go to dad's, right? If I can
Yeah.
make my children excited to go to dad's, if he screws it up and doesn't do anything with them and they don't like it, that's not my fault. I've
That's
gotten
it.
them excited. I've shown them that it's okay for them to have a good time outside of me. And it's going to do so many things from just a well-being standpoint, but also from a legal standpoint. It's really going to help your case. So do that, but understand that kids, they do see everything. They hear everything. Being in the kitchen while they're watching TV doesn't mean they're not hearing your conversations.
Exactly.
Because they're playing on their electronics doesn't mean they're not hearing your conversations. They feel your energy. They watch. You know, if you get annoyed every time dad calls on the phone, they see that. And allow your children to, again, go through the grief process, because you're losing somebody that you don't like anymore. You still have to grieve it. They're losing somebody who they are in love with.
Yes. And you never want them to feel that the only way they can be loved by you is if they side with you and don't like the other person. Because just like you said, they love the other person. And then you're putting them in this terrible situation that's way over their heads, that's way too complex. And it really, really can be damaging for them.
And that's where you can say, because they're just kids. They don't deserve to deal with that.
Yes. Amen. Let's talk a little bit about elder abuse. So I was saying in the intro, Rachel, I don't remember ever even hearing that term when I was young. So is this a new term? Is it a new phenomenon? What's the scoop on elder abuse?
Elder abuse is not new, I don't think, by any means. Maybe we've, have a new area of law about it. I don't even know that maybe it's been codified a different way. I think just this how fast information travels, and everything has made, just like everything else, elder abuse come to the forefront. Elder abuse in the most simple terms is where you either physically or emotionally or financially abuse somebody who is a dependent adult. That's a legal term. So, just because you pay for your kids doesn't mean they're a dependent adult, or somebody over the age of 65. I am seeing, an upturn in different elder abuse cases, maybe from a real estate perspective. And that could be because the cost of real estate in California has just gone up so high, and we're having baby boomers that bought at a very low, bought a house in San Diego, maybe for $150,000 that's worth 1.2 million. So that might have something to do with the increase in, financial elder abuse. But I don't think that it's a new phenomenon. I think our seniors have been susceptible, since the beginning of time, probably.
Oh, I'm sure. I just don't remember actually hearing those words, elder abuse.
We have laws that say that, so that's probably
Mhm.
why it.
I see. That makes good sense.
Yeah.
And you know what, Rachel, we've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's continue this discussion about elder abuse, and so we can inform people what it is and what it's doing to those victims and what's being done to help them. We'll talk about that when we come back.
For those looking to improve their lives, there's nobody better to turn to than Paula Shaw. Paula helps people regain successful lives by identifying and eliminating self-sabotaging behavior using a multitude of mind-body techniques to identify and resolve their core issues. Working with a wide variety of healing modalities, she provides her clients with the most effective process for their specific needs. To book a session with Paula, call 858-480-9234. That's 858-480-9234.
Welcome back to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and with me today is attorney Rachel King, who is an amazingly insightful person who is working on many levels of law, but the two we're discussing today are divorce and elder abuse, because as you all know, we're looking at grief this season, and people who are victims of both divorce and elder abuse are most definitely grieving. So, Rachel, is there a formal definition of what elder abuse is?
There is. It is not simple. It is very, very long. So I don't know that anybody on this that's listening wants to hear the formal definition, but again, I think you want to look at the person's age. Are they over 65? Or if they're under 65, do they have some kind of, cognitive impairment that was not from youth, right? So maybe an early onset dementia, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're being manipulated. They're being taken advantage of in a way that they would not have approved of before, right? So, and then of course there's traditional, physical abuse. Can't like punch anybody in the face. So if you do and they're over 65, then that's physical elder abuse. Not funny, but I mean, that one's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
The one that I think we don't understand, or that is maybe a little bit more controversial, is elder abuse by family members when it comes to estate planning documents, who is going to inherit, or financial elder abuse while the person is alive, taking their money, misappropriating their money, things like that. That happens. Both of those are probably the most highly litigated issues that I see, and the ones that I see, seniors fall victim to.
And you know what? Both of those things that you just named, I would not have thought of as elder abuse. So that is so fascinating to me. I thought it would be definitely physical, maybe leaving somebody in bed too long, not cleaning them, not taking proper care of them, not feeding them right. And I'm sure all those things are probably also aspects of one kind of elder abuse. But what you bring up is fascinating to me. And it seems to me that recently somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, there are all these scams. I was actually a victim of one myself, where somebody calls you and says, the IRS is looking at your records, and unless you meet us in a parking lot, with $1,500, the marshals are coming to your door. And I'm embarrassed to tell you, I mean, I was over 65, so that's maybe an excuse, but I was terrified.
Yeah.
And I get so angry that when I think about when I finally found out that what was happening, and the funny thing was I called my accountant right away, and she's like, "Oh, Paula, that's a scam." And immediately I get terrified thinking about my poor parents who are in their 90s. So I call my mother and I tell her what happened. She goes, "Oh, honey, that's a scam." It's like, does everybody know except me? But I mean, my heart was pounding. I was terrified. And so I called the number back, and the guy picked up the phone, IRS, which obviously it wasn't. And I said to you, I can only pray that there are special kinds of hell for people like you who would dare to do this to old people. And he click. He was
So there are tons of scams out there.
Yeah.
Scams are not new. They're getting more sophisticated, and you didn't fall for that because of your age. You fell for that because you didn't know. But you'll never fall for that again.
No,
But
I won't.
actually, you want to hear something really, really interesting?
Yes.
That is not the biggest kind of elder abuse. Actually, elder abuse is most likely from family and friends.
In what way?
So,
Expound on that.
victims, right? We're
Yeah.
talking about the person that's being abused is most likely to be abused by somebody very, very close to them. So, a family member or a caregiver
Mhm.
or a neighbor or a friend or somebody like that. It is not nearly as, though it happens, but it's not nearly as common for seniors to be abused by random people.
Wow. So now I'm thinking, if I'm the person, the older person that's going through this, not only am I upset about whatever they're doing, I've now more losses, loss of trust, loss of faith in that person, loss of belief that I'm safe, that I'll be okay.
One of the certainly, yes, you've got a lot of those losses. I think the one of the things that is probably the biggest area of grief or the biggest issue is so often people don't even realize that they're being abused, you know, because it's really it's manipulation and it's use of love,
Mhm.
similar in a divorce and a kids, but it's the use of love and resources, and I'm going to bring you food and I take care of you and I can do all this.
Yeah.
So let's say from an estate planning standpoint, I take care of you, mom, I take care of you, you have dementia and I have you come and live with me, and brother and sister are off living across the country, they don't even hardly call you, but I'm the one
Right.
taking you to your
Right.
doctor's appointments, I pay for everything, I do all of it. Why don't we go get your trust done? Hey, by the way, why don't you leave me a little extra, right?
Uh-huh.
If that has never been done before, right? If mom never always wanted to leave everything to all three of you, that's a form of elder abuse. You're literally coming in
Wow.
and saying, I'm feeding you, but now you have your mom thinking, well, am I going to stop getting taken care of or getting fed if I don't,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
that happens a lot.
Mm.
Caregivers that come in and say, I take care of you, so you should really leave. I mean, they're much more blunt about it, right? I
Yeah.
think you should leave me something in your inheritance. Or
Yes.
one I see a lot with caregivers is, I'll take care of you for $20 an hour, which is,
Mhm.
or the going rate, maybe a little less than the going rate. But in your
Uh-huh.
will, I want you to leave me,
Ah.
$100,000. These things are not allowed. They're
Mm.
violations of the law. And it's really scary because the person that's being victimized doesn't often know that they're being victimized, and it's
Yeah.
usually somebody else that brings it to their attention. So then this is the loss, Paula. The loss is that they didn't even know it themselves, so they feel like you did, that they aren't even, maybe they don't, I don't know what you just, I didn't even get this, like everybody else knew about it but I didn't. How did everybody
Yeah.
else see it, right?
Yeah,
So
you
maybe
feel defective.
they feel like they're not confident in themselves anymore.
Right. Right.
They have to go through this acceptance period that the person that they trusted is the one that's stealing, right? Or
Mhm.
doing something wrong.
Mhm.
And then they have to deal with the loss of that relationship, even if it's their
Absolutely.
child, right? But now
Yeah.
you have to, what does that relationship look like
Mm.
moving forward? And then in situations where the victim doesn't even know, so maybe for a dementia, I had a case, and it's a common case actually, where a dementia patient had a power of attorney.
Mhm.
The person that was acting as power of attorney went in and basically took all of their assets as their own,
Oh.
and including a
Oh.
house, right? So
Oh
now we
my
have to go back in and we have to undo this,
Mhm.
which is possible. But the victim didn't even know that this was happening.
Oh.
There's, late stage dementia. The entire family is now at odds. So now you have family members that are not only grieving the loss of a parent, potentially because of just natural causes and dementia and all things that, but they've lost their sibling that's committing the abuse. They've lost
Right.
all of this family trust. The family unit as they knew it is gone. And so it really devastates so many more people than the victim.
Yes.
And I think, again, it's a loss, it's a grief process. And while you can hate, for example, your brother for stealing all of mom's money, and brother can't do that, that's not allowed, you also need to understand that you're losing a brother to a certain degree,
Right.
the brother that you knew, and it's okay to have conflicting feelings about how you feel about that. It's also okay to forgive in those situations. I have a lot of clients who kind of refuse emotionally to forgive because how dare you did that to our parent. And to those people, I hope that they're still living. So find the forgiveness. It doesn't mean you have to be friends or anything, but find the forgiveness to forgive your family so that you don't have that weighing down on you anymore.
Absolutely. Because if the lack of forgiveness keeps you stuck, then you're constantly focused on that issue and you're not free anymore.
Right. And your parent or the victim is oftentimes deceased, right? So
Yes.
they're not suffering anymore, this loss.
Exactly. But you are.
So
Everybody involved is.
Yeah, so elder abuse is huge. It's devastating. It's horrible to watch. I actually feel so honored to even be able to help people that are the victims of elder abuse.
And Rachel, I could talk with you for hours, and this has been so amazing, but we are short on time. So what I'd like to ask you is, if anybody listening to this show now suspects that they're a victim of elder abuse, or if they are looking at a divorce and they would like to reach out to you or learn more from your offerings, how can they do that?
I am available by text or by phone. My phone number is on my website, which is thelawyerking.com. You can find me on all of the socials at The Lawyer King. Please watch my videos, like, subscribe, reach out. I'm happy to set up a consultation so that we can talk about whatever's going on with you, your family, or whatever the situation may be.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for all that you taught us today, Rachel, and all that you shared. You are an extraordinary human being. And if I were ever going through any of those experiences, I would definitely want you on my team.
Well, I hope you don't, but thank you so much too for really addressing the grief topic, and not in a negative way. I think it's something, like you said, it's natural, and I think we need to talk about it and just learn how to accept it, since it's part of being human.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to our viewers and listeners for being with us. And we will see you next week, same time, for Change It Up Radio. See you then. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me on Change It Up Radio. I hope you found this episode informative and entertaining. If you want to hear past shows, or you want to get information on being a guest or a sponsor of this show, go to changeitupradio.com. We all know that change is inevitable and it's necessary, but darn it, it's also tricky. My goal is to help you make the experience of change smoother and more productive. If you've benefited from this show, please subscribe to it, share it, and review it. That helps me to tune into what you really want to hear and what you really want to learn more about. Remember, you can find us on every major podcast platform and also on YouTube, Facebook, Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. We look forward to seeing you next week for Change It Up Radio.